Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to take a moment, as I've done before all of these sessions, to thank our partners, as Eleanor did, and to thank you, our members, for your support during these unprecedented times. This week has been an incredible experience. We've had some fun, we've had some great debates, and I've genuinely been bowled over by what an incredible job the team that we're lucky to have at ILC have done to make this event happen online. And also for the weekly webinars that they've been hosting. We are back to normal service next week. We've got our first international webinar on Wednesday, and it's back to business as usual. We've grown our partner base, and I was incredibly excited to announce Zurich Insurance as our latest insurer partner, Copart as our latest corporate partner, all achieved during these difficult times. Eleanor mentioned I'm really looking forward to these keynote sessions, and in particular this, our first one of the week. Why? Because they give me really good insights into my day job. Eleanor mentioned we've got 2 more sessions this week. It's not too late to register. They're free of charge. We've got one at 3 o'clock today, and then tomorrow we've got a great positive finish to the week as we're joined by another regular speaker, the CEO of All Things Positive and founder of Live Big, Stuart Baldwin. I can't stress enough that his session about positive mindset will help you be better tomorrow through what you learned today. And do share this with your employees. They'll really appreciate it. And we do really need to make sure we're supporting people from a mental health and wellbeing perspective in these challenging times. Like Eleanor, I'm really looking forward to seeing you all again face to face. But in the meantime, I'll introduce our first keynote speaker. Ian is the CEO of Consumer Intelligence, a regular speaker at our ILC events, and we always like to take a look at ourselves through the lens of the customer. He first took to the stage at our second ever conference, which was actually the first proper conference back in 2011, and has provided great insight, a fresh perspective, and he's an awesome presenter to watch and learn from. Ian believes the answer to building sustainably profitable business is simple. See the world through the eyes of your customer. He's made his life's work to build confidence in financial services, confidence for consumers, and confidence for the banks and insurance companies who benefit from the insight and experience that consumer intelligence brings to the market. And we're very lucky to benefit from that too. Today's no different as he takes a look at how the consumer has changed during the global pandemic and what they think of us claims folks. So just a quick reminder, please feel free to use the Q&A section. I'll keep my eye on the Q&A section. We'll probably miss any questions that appear in the chat. And Ian, welcome. How have you been doing during COVID, and how's it impacted you and your business?
Thank you so much for having me. This is kind of a bit surreal. I'm normally as you know, I pace up and down when I'm speaking normally, so today I'm like stuck here.
I'm keen to see how you translate that to the 2-dimensional screen.
It's going to be weird. It's been really interesting. We had what we call output-only working culture, which means that you can work from anywhere already. So transitioning to my loft was relatively easy. We pretty early on decided that we wanted to see what was going to happen with consumers and how they were reacting to this and how that would potentially impact insurers. And you'll see some of those insights in the presentation today. From our business perspective, I came at this thinking about, this is a pivotal moment in the history of our country and our industry and my company. And I don't know how good or bad it's going to be, but I'm absolutely positively determined that when we come out of this, both as a company and industry and as a country, we can do better and we can be better. And that's what we've set about doing. And I'm really proud of the team and doing that. So I'm not saying it's been easy, but it has been exciting. It's been interesting, that's for sure.
Fantastic. Well, I'll hand over to you, Ian. Good luck. And can't wait for you to share these insights.
Thank you. Let me just get myself sharing here. There we go. Let me just make sure that you can actually see that. I can see it. I think we're good. Somebody, I'm sure, will chip in relatively quickly if they can't. So what I want to do is talk about the past 10 years of ILC, of claims and what we've been monitoring over the last 10 years, a little bit about what's happening right now, today, data that's pretty much this week, and then talk about what we think has happened, what's changing for the future and how that will impact claims. And there are 3 key lessons that we are going to learn today that you're going to be able to take away from this session. So hopefully that's what we're going to get by the time we finish. We've been monitoring now claims for nearly a decade. We actually started, the very first claims data we started collecting was back in 2008. And we have been monitoring the way that consumers think that they have been served by their claims companies over that time. So we're going to be looking at that story within this session. So let me just talk quickly about how we do that. So at Consumer Intelligence, we speak to consumers. In the case of car insurance, motor insurance, it's 24,000 consumers a year. We're speaking to people who are the buyers of the insurance, right? So they have to actually be the person who purchases in order to be surveyed by us. And what we did was we were asking them about a bunch of other things. Do you use a price comparison website? Why did you buy from your current insurer? Who is your current insurer? We were collecting a bunch of other data for other reasons. And interestingly, sort of almost at the very end of that survey, there was a question that says, have you had a claim with your current insurer? And we asked a few questions about those claims. We asked about what they thought about the service of those claims along the way. And over the course of a decade, we have collected 34,000 claims experiences. And we have analyzed those 34,000 claims experiences, looking at how different insurers have been serving the market. And what we've been able to do over the course of that decade is to see whether overall motor insurers are better serving customers or whether that's got worse over time. So the graph that you're about to see is the industry-wide claim satisfaction when asked to score on a scale of 1 to 10. What do you think of the claim that you had with your current insurer? So it has to be with your current insurer. This is what they said. So you can see that effectively back in 2010, it was about an 8.05 was the satisfaction level. And we had a bit of a spike in 2014, went up to 8.44. And even though it's slightly come back down across the course of the last couple of years, we're on an upward trajectory again towards about an 8.31 based on the 2019 data. So this basically, I'm calling this the I Love Claims effect, Chris. This is the decade of I Love Claims. And you can see, when I presented 2011, I think that was the year that the tractor was outside, 8.04. And since then, things have just improved and improved and improved across the course of the industry. So first of all, well done. I mean, I think for any sector within any industry to be able to show as a sector this kind of performance, and I know it's gone up and come back down again, but this is really great. I mean, this is a really, really good performance, and it shows that as a sector, we're really trying to serve customers better is an amazing thing. But what we really wanted to get underneath the skin of is which companies are the ones that perform the best and which ones perform the worst. Because what we feel is that there's never actually been an independent consumer rating of claims. So could you come up with we started with a thesis, and this was pretty much just as we were going into lockdown, we started looking at this. Could you come up with a 5-star rating based on consumers' experience of claims that would allow you to be able to identify who the winners were and who had things still to learn? And could you then identify also what the actual pound value is of a good claim across the industry? So today is the very first time we're actually going to show that data. In order to do that, the first thing we needed to do was to come up with a 5-star claims model. So we didn't actually ask people to score on a scale of 1 to 5 or Trustpilot, that kind of thing. So we had to model based on the data we have. And I can now show you which companies have performed the best across the course of the last decade for motor insurance claims. And I remember when people voted for this a decade ago, they did not know that 10 years later, I would be showing you which companies were going to be performing best or worse. They had no idea that this was going to happen. So this is completely independent, completely, without any bias at all. So here are the companies. In 2010, you can see that there was a long list. These are the companies that would have got 5 stars for their claims rating. And then as we roll through the course of the decade, you can see that gradually the number of companies reduces down to about 2013. We only had 5 companies in 2013 that would have got a 5-star rating. And then as we go through the course of the decade, you can see it begins to grow again until today, where we have a number of companies getting what would be a 5-star rating. I think for me, the big call out here is Saga. So I don't know if there's anybody from Saga here on the line. If there are, just put your hand up or give yourself a big pat on the back. You've been getting a 5-star rating from your customers for a decade. That is 10 years of extraordinary hard work, 10 years of incredible claims experience, 10 years of your customers saying they think you're awesome. And I think, that is an extraordinary achievement, really amazing. And I congratulate you if you're here. I feel a little sorry for NFU Mutual. You also have an amazing claims experience. The only reason why in 2013 you're not on this list is because the sample size that we had for you was not statistically significant enough. So basically, if only you'd managed to get more people to have more claims back in 2013, we probably could have put you on the list for the decade as well. But it had to be statistically significant, otherwise it wouldn't be robust. So NFU Mutual, also an incredible job as well for a decade. But you can see some of the brands that are coming through there. LV, More Than, obviously, since 2013, has been on the list. Rias, Aegeus, there's quite a few Aegeus-powered brands here as well. So John Lewis down there, those were Aegeus-powered, and there was even a Tesco Bank back there in 2014. That's an Aegeus claims experience, obviously. You can see Direct Line Group coming through, and then finally Aviva coming through as well. So, these are companies who have done extremely well over an extended period of time, and I think you can just see that the effect of that. But I think the thing that is most exciting for me is this graph. This is the lifetime value of customers who are customers of 5-star claims companies. Now remember, if we just go back here, they change over time. So in order to pull this graph, these are not always the same customers, it's not always the same companies. But what this is basically showing you is a company that achieves a 5-star claims experience, a company that does well at claims, gets a 15.75% uplift in the lifetime value of the policyholder. Right? And that's not just the claimants, that's all of their policyholders. So what's really exciting about this is that, I did a bit of consumer intelligence, we call what you're about to see Husey maths. So this is effectively me doing a bit of maths on the back of the fag packet, but I reckon that 15.75% is worth about £275 million a year in gross written premium to those companies. Now this is an extraordinary number. And I want to be really clear, what this shows is that those companies that perform well at claims are not just good at claims, they are good at customer service, and they are recognized by customers for being that. So I think, you really can, Chris, draw a link from the industry, from claims into the industry. It's not just good at claims, it's good at customer. And I think that's a really important point that gets pulled through here. So that's my first learning. Companies that do better with claims do better with all customers. They get greater loyalty, they get greater retention. There's actually a piece of data I saw this morning that just looked at claimants, and people who gave a 10 for claimants, their customers don't even bother to shop around. And that's how powerful a great claim is. But companies that do better with claims do better with all customers. And they win, they do extraordinarily well. So that's the last decade. Let's talk about what's happened during the pandemic and what's happened across the course of the last few weeks. So we literally started, we kind of saw the pandemic coming. So we wanted to start interviewing insurance buyers about their behavior, about how they feel. As we went through the course of the pandemic, we wanted to know that sort of slightly before the beginning of the pandemic, and then track it all the way through. And we wanted to know not just about their habits of buying insurance, we also wanted to know about their attitude towards driving and how it might change risk in general. So how it might change the way that they actually drive post-pandemic as well. So we're going to look at both of those now. One thing that I think is really interesting, it's not a slide that we've got in the deck today, but it's a slide that it's a piece of data that I just think is the most extraordinary thing, is right back at the very beginning of the pandemic, we asked people if they thought they were vulnerable. We gave them the FCA's definition of a vulnerable customer. And we, interestingly, exactly a year ago, we asked people if they thought they were vulnerable, and 13% of people back in March 2019 said they thought they were vulnerable. We asked that question in March 2020, and 26% of people said they thought they were vulnerable, using the FCA's definition, not any sort of like, how do you feel you're vulnerable, but basically the exact definition given by the FCA. And we saw that behavior really right at the very beginning. Those of you who saw your numbers from within your business, you saw shopping behavior, shop around rates and switch rates just plummet off a cliff right at the very beginning of the pandemic, and you've seen it come back up again. That is vulnerable customers at work. That was the entire UK turning into a vulnerable customer and doing what vulnerable customers do. So that's one of the things that we've seen across the course of the pandemic. But if you really get into working things like changing working patterns, you can see that across the course of the weeks, we took a 2-week break in the survey, weeks 10 and weeks 11, and we just restarted on a new set of data where we're looking at forward-looking data rather than just current data. But this is looking across the course of the weeks of the pandemic and looking at people's attitudes and their behaviors. And what you can see is the number of people being furloughed right back at the beginning. There was nobody being furloughed because furlough didn't exist. Who would have thought that we would have a thing called furlough? Now, 28% of the population are saying they're furloughed. In fact, the most recent data that I saw this morning from the tracker that's going live this week is that 28% has dropped to 23% in the last week. And the other one that's kind of interesting is the number of people who've taken on additional hours, or their hours have increased. We're showing in week 12, which was last week, we were showing that at 16%. As of today, that's at 21%. So we're seeing people come off of furlough and go back to work. We're seeing working patterns change. Actually, the number of people working from home has pretty much stayed the same across the course of the surveys. It's still the same at 33% right now. So we're beginning to see changes in working patterns come through. The normal place of work closing down, you can see, has actually dropped off from 30%, dropping down to about 6% now. So real changes in working patterns. I know I'm sort of preaching to the converted in terms of this. We're all sat at home pretty much at this point in time. But the important piece about this data was not just what the history has been, but where we are right now. Because what happens with claims, of course, is that people come away, they've been working at home, they haven't been commuting, they haven't been driving as much, and now they start to drive. And now what do we see in terms of their driving patterns? And we'll talk about that in a second. We asked people what they thought would happen next, and 37% of the consumers that we spoke to last week said that they believe that they will work from home more now. And 40% of the people thought that they will work flexible or non-standard hours. I was talking to some university professors about this data, and their view was that we will almost certainly, we've been on a pattern moving towards a 4-day working week across the course of the last decade. COVID-19 might actually be the moment in which the 4-day working week becomes a thing, that's a permanent thing, with a 3-day weekend being a more permanent thing. One of the pieces of, it's not in our consumer data, but one of the pieces of research that's coming out of companies is that we've seen a 20 to 25% uplift in productivity as a result of people working from home. So people are more productive working from home than they are working in the office, and that might mean that they could work fewer days. What this basically means, and I was looking at some data from the Flow the other day, is that your key claims times of the day are in those early morning drop off at school, rush hour moments, and in those evening rush hour moments. Those rush hours are unlikely to happen in the way they have happened before. People are likely to continue to stagger the way they go into the office. They're likely to continue to do working from home, and that's likely to change the way we drive. What is impossible to say at this point in time is what you can say is that is likely to mean that we will see people not have accidents at those times of the day. There'll be less congestion at those times of the day. I'm not a traffic analyst, so don't ask me what that means. But what we are likely to see is that also means that people are less likely to have as much experience driving because they won't be driving as much, they won't be commuting as much. So we're likely to see that. And one of the other effects I think we may be likely to see is the potential that people certainly, so right now I'm in central London, the potential need to be in central London or in the centre of a city might reduce, and that might have an impact not just on motor claims, it might also have an impact on home claims as well, as people move out of the cities and begin to go and work in less urban locations. So big changes coming up in the way we work. I think, without a shadow of a doubt, it used to be, when we work with banks a lot, we work with a lot of insurers who basically didn't ever believe that you could work from home. That's changed. We've all proved we can work from home now. There's no question. Even if you're a trader on a trading floor, you can work from home. The question is not whether you can. The question is whether you will. So that's a big change that's coming up. And then I just really wanted to call this out as well. I know there's way too much stuff on this graph. I was the team back in the office said, you've put a graph up that's got way too many lines on it. But I just really wanted to call out, these are the things across the course of the last few weeks that people have called out as being important. And I particularly want to really draw your attention to the things that people said they would reduce spending on this or would consider getting rid of this or not paying for this. And in particular, I want you to look at the car, including tax and insurance. People are not saying they're going to keep their car. In fact, a minority of people are saying they would consider getting rid of this, or nearly 40% of people are saying they would reduce spending on this. So I think that's a big area that we're seeing as we move forward into the post-pandemic world. What we can't model at this point in time is what the potential impact might be, not of a recession, but of a depression that might actually substantially hit payroll and therefore people's ability to pay for their car or for their car insurance. And the other side of that, of course, as you well know, is when people's finances get tight, the upkeep of their cars drops off. So what we're absolutely seeing is fundamental change in people's views about cars and the importance of cars. And one of the pieces we did a few weeks ago was about the importance of a second car. So I think what we may well see is, depending on whether it's a U or a V or a W or whatever the shape of the recession is, people asking questions about second cars. And I think that's a very interesting area just to keep your eye on for the future. The other one here, for those of you who are also in home insurance, by the way, is the number of people who said they would consider getting rid of or not paying for their contents insurance. Don't forget, if I'm actually sat at home all day long, the likelihood of me being burgled goes down. And so there's a lot of people here saying, you know what, I just won't bother with this. The one that I find interesting is the one over on the bottom right-hand side there, which is subscriptions. In the week 12, we actually had to include, we included the fact that that would include things like Netflix. So you can see people were considering that they would get rid of this. But once you include things like Netflix and Spotify, actually you begin to see that drop off. And I think we'll see that drop off even more over time. I don't think people realize that Netflix is a subscription. Upcoming renewal behaviors for motor insurance. We have masses of data of this within our initial tracking surveys, but we wanted to particularly track across the course of COVID what people's intentions were. We know, because we talked to our insurer partners, about the fact that people's shop around rates dropped off right at the very beginning. We talked about that in terms of vulnerable customers. And you can see here that intention to renew is at 56%. with, as of today, 25% of people saying they would renew their policy at the current cover level. That is consistent across the course of the last decade. So that number has pretty much stayed the same across the course of the last decade. The one to watch is policy with the same provider, but with a different cover level because they're planning on doing less mileage, or shop around for a new policy with different cover level, which has slightly fallen away. But certainly people will be viewing that they're doing less miles or have done less miles, and so are likely to shop around as a result. So we're going to keep our eye on those over the next few weeks and months, just to see what impact that may have on shop around and switch rates. I'm going to quickly go over the top of this, but just to show you right down the very bottom there, do you think your insurer has supported you? And do you think your travel company supported you? How do you think the banks have been in terms of supporting you, the healthcare industry in terms of supporting you? You can see that insurers are right down the bottom there at 4% in terms of very well. They've very poorly is over there on the far left-hand side. This varies by insurer massively. There is a wonderful spike on a graph about the Admiral effect, giving £25 away. I have to tell you that I think that might be the best spent £25 ever in the history of motor insurance. We'll wait and see when we see the renewals come in. But Admiral customers went from thinking that they were pretty rubbish to thinking that they walked on water pretty quickly. So that's what's happened across the course of the industry. I think I'll crack on, Chris, and I'll let, if you want to come back to any of that, I can do that afterwards. But learning number 2 is that the pandemic will have long-lasting consequences for claimants. Right? So this is going to change the way that claimants think about their car insurance, about their journeys, about when they take their journeys, and that is going to change their use of their vehicle and therefore will change their claims pattern. And I think there's no question that that effect is there and will continue to be there in the future. If I was writing a business plan for 2021 for claims, it would be very different from the plan that I wrote for 2020 because it's going to be different from a consumer's perspective, from a claimant's perspective. And then let's just talk about the future of claims. I did promise I would do that as well. So we look out into the future and we think about where that's going. We try to do that through the eyes of the customer. There's several key themes that we've been tracking, and I don't think these themes have gone away as a result of COVID-19. If anything, they've been enhanced. So first of all, there's been a consumer affordability squeeze, which has been going on for about 5 years, but is absolutely going to get put on steroids at this point in time because there's going to be even less affordability. So consumers will want flexible products. We've already seen a massive growth in things like cover in the lead up to the pandemic, but policies like by miles, which offer you sort of the basic level of cover and then you pay by the mile after that. Those kind of policies, that sort of a flexibility, that's the sort of thing that consumers are going to be looking for from their products going forward because they just don't have the money they used to have. If they even have their car or their second car, there's some real needs to think about that there. But there also might be an increase in fraud as a result of this as well, because people will have less income. The second one is about consumers being in control. We're seeing a shift from a product to a service. So, this is a general effect that we've seen across the market. So you've seen that e-scooters are going to be legalized as of Saturday. But there's been a lot of conversation about whether there should be e-scooter insurance. What they're actually legalizing is the rental of e-scooters. And so what that basically means is you won't need to buy insurance for e-scooters. You'll just get it as part of your rental. So that's the shift from product to service. So it's insurance as a service rather than insurance as a product. And you have to be ingrained within the end-to-end user experience. Those kind of things, like you go in an Uber and you're insured, those kind of things are the things that will be then baked in. So I won't buy insurance, I will buy travel. I will buy it because I want to be in control of my life. I want to have the ability to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And I have that experience in other parts of my life. I watch what I want to watch on Netflix, etc. That's before we even get into changing mobility. Things like taking a train. I'm in London right now, but if I was going to Bristol, I wouldn't take the train right now, I'd drive. So there's some real changes in how mobility is going to operate in general. And that's before we even get into things like semi-autonomous vehicles and drones as methods of transport. I think all that's going to happen is that the COVID-19 and the pandemic is going to heighten that. Who's going to be taking public transport? Who's going to be traveling by train? If you're going away for the weekend with your family, will you still take the train or will you drive? Or will you potentially find some other way of doing it? These are now tectonic plates that have shifted during COVID-19. So I think we're going to see some change there. And then personalized everything. We've already seen data and artificial intelligence coming together within the industry. You've seen it in claims where you can take a photograph of a claim and then it can assess what the value of that claim is. That's been around for quite a long time. But I think this whole thing of it all being about me and all being me being able to do what I want to do when I want to do it, deep personalization for me, deep experience for me, I think has been driven also through this pandemic. I have now apps that I'm using much more regularly for making payments. Apps like Snoop, which have launched during the pandemic, which basically looks at all my payments and recommends a way for me to reduce the costs using artificial intelligence. All of this has been put on steroids and accelerated massively as a result of the pandemic, and I do not see that slowing down. I just see there is a wall of cash that has not been spent or invested in fintech across the course of the last 6 months that is still looking for a home. It is sat in investors' bank accounts waiting to invest. There's a real big opportunity coming up. And the last one is something new that I've just added in the last few days about a big theme. And I think this one is something that's not really consumer-led, but I think this is being done on behalf of consumers, so you'll have to forgive me, an increasingly assertive state. So basically, whether it's the government, the PRA, the FCA, they seem the FCA came into this recession. It's been promising to go agile, and it has absolutely nailed it in terms of going agile. It's been coming out with ruling after ruling after ruling. The entire VI case that's going to the courts. This is a different kind of FCA. This is a different kind of state intervening into your industry, into our industry, and I see that that's not going to stop. That's not going to go away. If anything, they've got the bit between their teeth now, and I think you'll see some very interesting regulatory approaches over the course of the next few months and years, especially if we have a depression and the regulators need to step in order to support the economy. So I think you need to take this thing about the regulator, which may have been somewhere low down on your risk register, and reevaluate that going forward. So what that basically means that claims in the future are going to evolve very dramatically. It's going to be the survival of the fastest. You're going to have to get to market. The number of people who work either in the insurance industry or in the banking industry that we work with, one of the big banks we work with says they've done more innovation in the first 6 weeks of the pandemic than they had done in the previous 3 years. They rolled out more stuff. This is a battle for speed, pace, go, go, go. And there's a wall of money prepared to invest in it as well. So I think that those are sort of the three key things that I'm taking away from this. Chris, I'm getting close to a wrap up now. 3 key learnings. Number 1, companies that do better at claims do better with all customers. It's a cultural thing. Well done to all those people who've done so well. But it's culture. It's culture at the heart of this that's driving things. The second thing is the pandemic has changed the industry from a claimant's perspective. Not forget what you guys have done, and I know you've done an amazing job, but from a claimant's perspective, it's changed. And the future of claims is about pace. It's about rolling out innovation at pace and keeping that pace up. So that's it. We've been through a journey of the past, the present, and the future. Thank you very much for your time. I saw a few people ask questions along the way, but I'm happy to go back over any of those points if you want me to. And if you want, I think the deck is going to be made available to participants after this as well.
Yes, we've had some great questions, Ian. The most common one being, can we access the slides, the data? We've had a conversation that we would like to keep tracking this together. I think there's some really good insights in the chat as to what other data we might want to lay over this. Really good debate I was having, unfortunately, with an anonymous attendee around how some of these are brands and brokers, and how that consumer journey identifies the difference between the two. And I remember back in 2011, you did a piece, the very first presentation you did, I remember vividly, was actually when you start with a halo brand, customer expectations through the roof. Because I think your opening gambit was, this is going to be the worst presentation you'll ever see. And from there, you managed to exceed our expectations, which was your cheeky plan. So a couple of things I jotted down. There's been a lot of conversation this week about how we've dealt with vulnerable customers during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And the collaboration that's come and the sort of, I think to your point, the fact that as an industry, we want to keep some of these things that have happened. I was fascinated, the number of vulnerable customers, by their own definition, linked to the FCA working, 26%, that's 1 in 4. It's more than 1 in 4. That, to me, does lay the foundations for a different journey that identifies those people. Because at 1 in 4, it's kind of worth it. It's worth it for everybody, but it becomes easier to operationalize something different. What sort of things do you think vulnerable consumers need differently?
Oh, God. If you'd asked me that question 12 weeks ago, I would have had no clue. But we get a very strong sense from consumers as to what vulnerable needs differently. So first of all, every part of your comms has to be written as though it's a sun reader reading it, right? So you have to dumb it down to the lowest possible level. And that's not me being offensive to sun readers. That's basically saying that a lot of the stuff we see and a lot of the communications within the market are written in legal speak in order to try and, not befuddle, but in order to try and cover risk. We even see that in the BI stuff that's kicking off at the moment, right? Are you insured? Aren't you insured? With vulnerable customers, you have to write it for sun readers, and you have to give the service at a very base level, because what we saw with anxiety, with a national anxiety, if you can remember that first week of lockdown, that national anxiety, that's how vulnerable customers feel all day, every day. And they don't read, they're not listening, they can't retain information. They're in total, it's a really stressful situation, and you've got to really pull them through it. And not only that, but they may have moments of total clarity. But you then have to be aware of the fact that, they could go back to being vulnerable very soon. And I just so you know, I'm a vulnerable customer, right? So I run my own business, I'm diabetic, and so therefore I am a vulnerable customer. I don't appear like that right now, but if I was to have a hypo or if my business was to start getting into financial distress, I would act completely differently from the way I act now. So you have to think about you on March the 24th and think about how you felt right then. That's how a vulnerable customer feels every day.
Interesting. And I think we can all learn a lot from that. A couple of other things that really stood out to me, obviously have a selfish interest in the transportation industry. We've done a lot of global consumer research into sentiment around vehicle ownership. Stu Sandell from Enterprise talked about this on Monday's panel debate. And I think it's safe to say people don't really want to go on cruise ships, but do see the motor car as a relatively safe and trusted cocoon. Whether it be one that I own or whether it be one that I rent for my own use. I think it's quite interesting that the sort of Uber model, and personally, that'd be right next to a tube for me in terms of how I would personally feel. So I'd like to dig into that a little bit more with you after the event. because there's a great debate there as well around some of the green initiative we're seeing. You know, whilst the planet has become healthier with all these vehicles, you know, off the road during lockdown and all of those really, there's a diametrically opposed viewpoint between, you know, consumers want more cars and London and our cities are not built for that. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that plays through because the tube and train infrastructure are so key to getting people in and out of the big cities. Another one I saw, and again, I think this is probably just a call-out observation from me, that graph where you showed insurers towards the bottom in terms of how they've supported customers during COVID. I think for me, this is almost why I Love Claims was born, which is I don't think about my insurer at all until the moment of claim and maybe the moment of renewal. So that 4% didn't trouble me. What I saw on that slide was a huge amount of people that said unsure because, I don't know, actually, I've not really thought about my insurance company during this time. And that 4% where they've been looked after well may be tied into those that have had a claim or an incident or a query. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So we are actually now doing some work on have you had a claim during the pandemic? So
okay.
We don't have enough sample size for that one at this point in time. Actually, that 4% probably is mostly Admiral customers.
Right. Okay. So that was the big one positive move that you referenced earlier, for sure. Yeah.
Big time. And I think, don't forget, we're talking about all insurers. So if you actually broke it out into travel insurance, and I think this is the bit where the industry really has got some difficulties. If you look at travel insurance, consumers who had thought that they were covered by their travel insurance policy for the loss of their holiday, and then found out that actually travel insurance is the port of last call, not the port of first call, have become quite disenfranchised by their travel insurance policy as a result.
No, that makes absolute sense. A question that came in very early from Paul Dixon from Zurich Insurance, our latest part. Paul's been a great support with Amy this week. He asked whether the data collection methodology has changed over the last 10 years and any learnings in that.
No, exactly the same methodology for the entire decade. So we've done it all online for the entire time, which when we started, people said, oh, well, you shouldn't be doing it online, blah, blah, blah. And now everybody does it online. So we've used the same methodology. We have changed nothing relating to claims. Some of the questions have changed across the course of the last decade, just because, behaviors have changed, but the actual methodology is the exact same. So where you see those spikes in 2013, 2014, that's not down to a change of methodology. That is the industry.
Good. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've just about hit our time. You answered the big question that we will share the deck, the information. I'm sure there are lots of people like me seeing the opportunity that can come from your insight. Some fascinating things that they go almost contrary to what you'd think. So when we had the chat a couple of weeks ago, more people at home, more time on the hands, I will shop for a better price. But that shopping number just falls off a cliff. Fascinating stuff. So thank you again, sir. Thank you for all the support over the past 10 years. I look forward to working with you in the future. And introduce everyone. There'd be rapturous applause at this point, Ian, if we were together on stage. But thank you. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.